Hello, and welcome to another Joe and Kat Chats. Oh my goodness, we're
Wow,
back again. We're
we're back.
talking about Maslow and the American Dream today.
Yes, we are.
How
Yes,
are
we
you,
are.
Joe?
I am Miss Wells. I am my ebullient and effervescent self as usual. I'm feeling lively, and I'm looking forward to a robust conversation today with you. As always, it's always a enlightening experience getting to chop it up with you for 60 minutes on the Joe and Cat Chats network.
Heck
And
yes.
yeah, and it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, as Mr. Rogers used to say. I don't have a cardigan. I don't have Mr. McFeely delivering the mail. I don't have King Friday the 13th in the land of make-believe nearby. Daniel Tiger's not coming over for pizza and dinner later on tonight, but we're good to go. How are you?
Lovely. Yeah, no, that's wonderful. I always look forward to this too.
Mhm,
Yeah, I'm doing well, just busy, keeping myself busy as usual.
mhm,
I'm always doing that. It's
mhm,
raining here
mhm,
today, so I went for a long walk in the rain with the dog, so that was good.
mhm, mhm. Awesome, awesome, awesome.
Awesome.
Yes, ma'am.
So, what are we talking about today? Who is Maslow and what is the American dream?
Okay. Well, Abraham Maslow, he was a psychologist. And
Hmm.
what he did is he studied human qualities and he studied the lives of really exemplary or elite human beings. He was like, hey, you know what? How, how do we use the mind to get the best of the best? And how do we get more people who may not necessarily be their best to become better than themselves or better than they already are? So in 1954, Maslow created a hierarchy, and it was in his book called The Hierarchy of Human Needs, Motivation and Personality. And what he did is he talked about this pyramid. It's a hierarchy, and it's 5 levels. The first level, the lowest level, he talked about are physiological needs like air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, reproductive rights. The next level up, safety needs. And he said, hey, you know what? Safety, we're talking about personal security, employment, health. That's security. The next
Hmm.
level after that, once you get to a point where you feel like you have your safety needs met, is love and belonging. I know in my Instagram video, I somewhat mistakenly said love and happiness, but because I like Al Green so much. But it actually does make sense to even say love and happiness, because
Hmm.
with that love and happiness or love and belonging is a sense of friendship and a sense of connection. Feel like you belong somewhere. You're a part of something, or something that is bigger than you, that is more important than you. The
Hmm.
next level after that, which comes logically as a result of being part of something that makes you feel that makes you feel like you belong somewhere, is esteem, which is is you feeling good about yourself. And that comes from a feeling of recognition, a feeling of self-respect, being recognized by others, having some sort of achievement, having some sort of confidence to say, hey, you know what? I'm a part of this and I did this. And I feel good about myself and I want to do more of this, what makes me feel good. And then when you reach to that point where you feel like you're the best version of yourself, that is the top of the pyramid, that is the summit of the mountain, if you will. And that is self-actualization. And that's when you reach this point of becoming the best version of you, where
Hmm.
where policy doesn't govern your life, morality governs your life, where you're free to be as creative as you want to be, and there's no sort of, you don't feel as people are going to judge you. And the reason
Hmm.
why you don't feel that people are going to judge you is because you've reached that lower level before it, which is esteem, which comes from having self-confidence and having the respect of others. But more importantly, and really most importantly, having respect for yourself. So this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we took a look at this about a couple of weeks ago during one of our many Instagram messages that we exchanged back and forth throughout the week. And
Yeah.
we're like, you know what? There's a whole lot of stuff here that could be related to public policy or populist policies. And I think if people did the lowest level stuff first, the physiological needs, if politicians or public servants met the body politics physiological needs, a whole lot of other needs would be taken care of. And not only would it be good public policy or good politically for a public servant to take a look at the physiological needs based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs to create effective public policy that would quite honestly be populist, but it would also be the right thing to do because we should be looking to do the right things. You know, it was Martin Luther King that once said the time is always right to do what is right. And there's no better time to do what is right than right now.
Right now. Yeah, for sure. Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, that was great. Thank you for outlining all of that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about both the hierarchy itself and what we can sort of do to apply it to sort of this populist and policy understanding. And for those who are taking notes, we're going to go over some of this stuff in a little bit more depth in case you missed all of it, but it's very easily Googleable or searchable. I shouldn't use their company name.
They're not paying us. We're not endorsing them.
Yeah, exactly. They're also kind of
That's
evil. It's one of those things. It's fine.
I think that's a future topic also.
Yeah, totally.
Future topic.
So in the sense of populism, I actually looked up the definition, which is a political approach that strives to appeal to ordinary people who feel that their concerns are disregarded by established elite groups. So that's the Oxford Dictionary definition. And then I found sort of a easier to digest version, which is it has basically two parts. Populism claims to speak for ordinary people, and those ordinary people must stand in opposition to an elite establishment, which stops them from fulfilling their political preferences.
Interesting. Okay.
So I think this is very interesting in the sense that we can totally, just from seeing the definition or hearing the definition, we can totally think of how this is impacting our lives right now, which the election, this is going to come out on election day for the USA.
Yes.
But
it's election day in the USA, but everybody around the world gets an opportunity to watch this episode.
Yes, this is true.
Yeah. So it's not just coming out in the US. So they go, again, this is just for United States eyes only. And then we're leaving out our Belgian brothers and sisters, or we're leaving out our brothers and sisters in Hong Kong, or our brothers and sisters in Canada. No. We're for the people.
Yeah, we're an inclusive pair for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I know that even as someone who doesn't live in America, I will be paying attention to what happens in the election.
So will I. I absolutely will be also.
Just as we pay attention to lots of other places, just like we talked about last week.
Yeah, absolutely. So. Absolutely. We absolutely did. So yeah, we talked about, we already outlined the 5 levels, the 5 places or spaces on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now, we talk about populism. I know Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto, and populism, quite honestly, could be described as the proletariat versus the bourgeoisie. The proletariat being the working class, the people who are out there every day in the streets trying to make $1 out of 15 cents, trying to make $1 out of 15 cents. And then you have the bourgeoisie, who are the elites, who look down on the proletariats, who are willing to exploit the proletariats for their labor and not pay them fair wages for their hard work. So what we want to do is make sure that we use, or at least have, some sort of populist policy points that would fit into the framework that we have here through Maslow's hierarchy of needs, so not only do we get a better quality of public servant, but quite honestly, so we can get a better quality of government. And so we become less dependent on policy to govern our lives, and we become more dependent on morality that is enforced through the infrastructure of a solid institution. And that infrastructure of a solid institution is government, and government is the people. So if we get better people, not only through better populist policies that produce better people that can be better public servants, but by default, we will also create policies that would help people become more free so they can become better people.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting point because we have talked about, how problematic the systems and structures and institutions are many times before. And
Absolutely.
now it kind of seems like we're sort of for a big government solution. And so I think that's an interesting point to sort of explore given this sort of populist polarization and the time we're in right now where they're all over the world. I mean, it's sort of a left versus right thing.
Right.
Um, and populism is prevalent on both sides of that spectrum.
Agreed.
So yeah, so that's an interesting thing. I think we can explore a little bit more because I don't know where you stand on that, but it seems like for me at least, I want the system to not function the way it has been functioning because I see it as something that serves the elite. And as someone who's on sort of the left leaning side of sort of a populist argument or whatever,
Mhm.
politically, I am still for big government. And so, it seems like it should be opposing each other, but I think that government can serve a really helpful as a helpful thing to be able to provide these needs, the basic needs of people, so
Agreed.
that we can strive for self-actualization.
Exactly. Exactly. And I completely understand where you're coming from. And I think I might have even discussed this in a previous episode or in another Zoom chat. And as you and many of the viewers and listeners know, one of my master's degrees is in nonprofit management from the University of Baltimore. And I said this in one of my classes probably about 4 years ago. And I said, wait a minute, nonprofit agencies are really just outsourced government agencies. And when I talked about the whole idea of a nonprofit organization is an organization that does some sort of public good. If you think about governments are technically classified as nonprofits. The major difference between a nonprofit organization and a government is that a nonprofit organization is a private institution that does public good. A government is a public institution that does public good.
Mhm.
So realistically, nonprofits and governments essentially form the same sort of function in terms of being organizations that are supposed to serve the public. That is exactly why I constantly refer to government employees as public servants because
Mhm.
they're supposed to be serving the public. That is why the nonprofit sector in some instances is called the charitable sector
Mhm.
because they're performing some sort of charitable good. They're performing some sort of altruistic endeavor from the goodness of their organization's mission and vision statement in order to better serve someone else who needs that sort of help. So what I'm getting at is I think if government were actually funded properly and government were organized properly, there wouldn't need to be nearly as many nonprofit organizations in existence.
Mhm.
And I think if people understood the history of nonprofits, at least in the United States, there when President Ronald Reagan decided to cut a lot of the social programs that met many of the physiological needs on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, a whole bunch of nonprofit organizations came into fruition as a result in order to pick up the slack where the government decided to turn its back on its people. Now, we've seen more and more of this over the past, quite honestly, past 40 years, especially during the Clinton administration, where Bill Clinton took a sledgehammer to welfare and
Mhm.
destroyed the AFDC program, which was the Aid for Families with Dependent Children. He essentially took food and healthcare out of children's mouths, away from children, which again further destroys the lowest level of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, physiological needs.
Mhm.
So that as a result, no one's ever, if you don't have the basic needs that are being met, you can't feel safe. You can't feel any sort of sense of family, especially a sense of family when one of the senators that was in Bill Clinton's presidency was Joe Biden, who wrote a crime bill that destroyed a whole lot of families.
Sure did.
There's that.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to have any sort of self-respect, have any sort of esteem when you don't have a job and the federal government doesn't give you a federal jobs program,
Mhm.
or you're homeless and you're constantly being disrespected because you don't have a job and it's through no fault of your own. And if you can't feel any sort of self-respect or feel any sorts of belonging or any sorts of freedom, either through carceration or incarceration,
Mhm.
then there's no way you can ever become the best version of yourself.
Right.
So what we want to do is discuss some generally agreed upon populist policy points that I think everyone can look at and say, hey, you know what? Yeah, that would actually be really good for a lot of people. We should do that and apply them to the appropriate levels on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So that way, hopefully, if you're a public servant, you're watching this video and you're learning from two college educated people, one who's living in the United States, one living in Canada. So you could take this back to wherever you're a public servant, whether it's Edmonton, Alberta, or whether it's Scarborough, North Carolina, or Toronto, Canada, or Panama City, Panama, or Tegucigalpa, Honduras, or Paris, France, or Sarajevo, Bosnia, wherever it is. And you can say, hey, you know what? This brother over here, this sister over here, they know what the hell they're talking about. You should listen to them more often. Oh, and we're making it mandatory to binge watch Joe and Cat chats on all national television channels across our country.
Look at that. um, yeah, no, I totally, yeah, that's great. That's exciting that we're going to do that. I just wanted
Yeah.
to sort of outline, I guess, because the hierarchy of needs is usually presented in a pyramid with the physiological needs as sort of the base of the pyramid that
Absolutely.
has, the most things. And it's sort of presented as like, once you get one step, um, your basic needs met, basically you can move on to the next step. And the
Right.
top part is the self actualization, like you said before.
Yes, ma'am.
Um, and when Maslow released this, it was sort of like once you get the physiological needs met, you can move up. But he then later in his career said that, oh no, like you don't have to have all of the of one level in order to move up. There are things that move around, and you don't always need all of the needs met
Interesting.
of a certain level in order to have others. And I thought that was really interesting because I was reading about a study that was done that showed that some of the needs, or sorry, there are universal human needs,
Ooh, okay.
but across cultures, the like categories were at different levels
Makes sense.
almost on this pyramid. So like
Sure.
for different cultures, it was like, maybe esteem was more of an important one, and love and belonging could be higher or lower, like you need that before you need safety or whatever. So
Sure.
I just thought that was an interesting thing I came across.
That's you know what, I've never actually considered that the cultural aspects of all this, but actually that does make sense. And maybe for some particular cultures, it may not necessarily be a 5-level pyramid.
Exactly. Yeah.
For some cultures, it might only be 4 levels because their governments are so populist that the physiological needs are being met, and it would be almost unthinkable to not meet the needs of your people. Like, wait a
Yeah.
minute, what? We can't provide clean air, clean water, food, shelter, sleep, and reproductive rights and clothing for our people? What kind of government are we?
Yeah.
And quite honestly, there's a terminology that's being bandied about more and more when we talk about the devolution of countries
Mm.
as nations and countries and their societies that are within the countries. And when governments fail to meet basic needs, when governments fail to provide clean air and clean water and food, and shelter and reproductive rights. That is what you call a failed state.
Yes.
When governments cannot provide those basic services to all of its citizens, that is what you call a failed state. The United States of America, quite honestly, isn't as united as you think it is. But moreover, it is a failed state.
Mm-hmm.
It is a failed state. There are people waiting on lines for food as a result of this pandemic. There are millions of unemployed Americans who don't have any sort of job prospects, nor do they have any sort of economic stimulus coming their way. Reproductive rights are potentially going to be an issue with the swearing in of new Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett.
Yeah.
There's an eviction crisis coming, where supposedly over 30 million people will be evicted from their homes, and that is just residential. When I'm going to discuss the commercial property crisis that's going to happen as a result of people now working from home. So there's now going to be all these big office buildings that are going to remain unoccupied. Fracking is a problem, so that's going to cut out your clean water and clean air. I mean, look at the United States pulled out of the Paris Accord.
Yeah.
So, so the eco side is going to be a potential issue. And quite honestly, we should really do an episode about the environment, but that's another conversation for another time. But that being said, these sort of populist policies that would serve everybody, when you look at them and you're like, you know what, yeah, everybody should have that. You know what, we should have this. We're going to go ahead and plug them in to Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, I think, oh my gosh, I think that there is a lot to be said about Canada in that regard too. Like I would consider Canada also a failed state. We have a lot of different policies that protect people for things like healthcare.
Sure.
But we still have, many of the indigenous reserves still on a boil water advisory for like a decade.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, those basic needs are not being met for all of the citizens of our countries. And
Right.
It's the same in many other places in the world.
I agree.
This is something that, we're talking about because we want change. And I think that those who listen also want that change. And so I think that's why, the populism is topical right now, because it's, even though, there's sort of this, pardon me, the like polarization of our political views, I think that there is also something that is to be said about how the populist ideology just wants, our physiological and safety needs met.
Exactly.
That's what government can do right now.
Exactly. That's exactly what government can do. And again, Ms. Wells, the reason why we do these conversations is to make sure that we provide something that people can watch this episode and an hour or 45 minutes or 50 minutes later, like, damn, I did learn something. Let me try this at my workplace, or let me try this. Let me show this to my students on Zoom. Or you know what? I'm working City Hall. We should have a referendum about this. Maybe this could lead to a potential reparations plan in a particular jurisdiction.
Yes, please.
Maybe this could lead to making sure that more Indigenous folks get the benefits and services that they're entitled to as a result of them being Indigenous people, whether it's Indigenous brothers and sisters in the United States or our precious Indigenous brothers and sisters in Canada or Colombia or New Zealand, the Maori in New Zealand, or the Ainu in Japan, or the Aborigines in Australia, or the Indigenous folks in Bolivia, wherever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my goodness. So do you want to get into it? Do you want to talk about reparations a little bit more? Reparations, particularly for American descendants of slaves.
I am always looking to get into it. I'm always looking to get into the mix. So let's mix it up. The first level we talked about is physiological needs. We talked about air, water, food, shelter. An obvious policy point that I think many people would agree with is making sure that we take care of the environment. Making sure that we take care of the environment would be the Green New Deal. A
Mm.
demilitarized Green New Deal would certainly make sure that we take care of the environment. It would provide good paying jobs, which would cover a safety need, that's employment.
Yeah.
It would also create a physiological need, making sure that we have clean water, clean air. And guess what? When you have clean water and clean air and clean soil, because you've removed many of the toxins from the soil and you're not fracking, and you have clean water, guess what? You're going to have a better quality of food.
Mhm.
You won't need Monsanto. You won't need them. You won't need to label your food as organic or inorganic, because everything will be organic. Everything will
Mhm.
be organic. You won't have to say, oh, this is organic, I'm going to pay more for it. No. If everything was grown organically, you wouldn't need to have Driscoll's berries grown in a hothouse, or you wouldn't need to have certain types of meat grown in a laboratory or a test tube.
Mhm.
You would be able to grow everything off the land, because Mother Earth has always been providing for everybody.
Yeah, and I would go even further that we need to scrap sort of the conventional agriculture in general,
I thoroughly agree with that.
because whether it's a question of organic or not, I think that the way it's grown, in these monocultures, that's the real problem. We need biodiversity, we need ecosystem,
Mhm.
resurgence. Yeah, we need to be growing our food in you know things like food forests, which is something that I really quite like about the sort of permaculture stuff.
Right.
Yeah, we need to have more diverse ways of growing our food and not just creating these monocultures, because that's destroying the water, the air, the food, all of the things.
Everything.
Super destroying it,
It's destroying everything.
particularly meat agriculture, like you mentioned.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, another one of the physiological needs is reproduction,
Mm.
the ability for women and non-gender conforming people to have children. A great way to make sure that reproductive rights are ensured is to make sure that everybody has health care. Not
Yeah.
making sure that everybody has access to health care, but making sure everybody gets health care. And a great way to do that is, the fancy terminology is Medicare for all, but you can also say universal health care or a single payer healthcare system,
Mhm.
much like the greatest Canadian of all time, Tommy Douglas, has done in Canada. So a great way to make sure that everybody make sure they have reproduction. And guess what? One another physiological need is sleep. Well, if
Mhm.
you are healthy, you're going to get a better night of sleep.
Mhm.
And if you have and shelter is another physiological need.
Yes.
A, a great way to make sure that everybody has shelter is a housing for all program.
Yeah,
In,
absolutely.
in Helsinki, Finland years ago had what's called the Housing First program, where the government decided to get homeless people off the streets and put them in housing. Because when you actually are put into a house, you actually have a physical address. When you have a physical address, it's much easier to, guess what, find a job. And employment is a safety need, the next level. So again,
Yeah.
this just shows Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you give people the basics like clean water, food, clean air to breathe, a place to sleep, a place to live, clothing, and the ability to reproduce, you can then get some of the other stuff that comes with it, like safety needs. So, for example, when we talk about safety needs, we talk about jobs. A federal job guarantee will be a great way to ensure that people meet that safety need. Universal basic income is a great way to
Mhm.
make sure that everybody meets that safety need. When we talk about health, again, Medicare for all is a great way to make sure that everybody remains healthy. When we talk about another safety need is resources. A great way to make sure that everybody has resources is not only universal basic income and a federal job guarantee, but rewriting the tax code to make sure that corporations pay their fair share of taxes, so those tax dollars goes back into the government, so the government has appropriate funding to have agencies that can meet the physiological or lowest level needs on the Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid.
Yeah, totally.
Additionally, making sure that everybody has access to resources. A great way to make sure of that is to have reparations for American descendants of enslaved people.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that the interesting thing about all of this is you're talking about things that like we can implement right now. We can provide housing for all. We can provide a jobs program. We can provide, healthcare for everyone.
Agreed.
We can provide reparations. And what is that all going to do? Like that's just going to cover everyone's basic needs, physiological needs, safety needs. And what happens once you cover those is people can start to take care of themselves and their community once those things are met. And so when we're talking about having safety needs, one of the things that I wrote down in my notes on that sort of category is like, you know, your actual safety, like in your community, law and order, government, justice systems, including police, freedom from fear. Those things are like things we need, but they don't have to look like they look right now. And we've talked
Thoroughly
about
agree.
this before. Once those policies can be implemented, and they are implemented, and people
Yes.
start getting those basic needs met, we don't have to have police anymore, because once we get into love and belonging, we're going to be caring a lot more about our community members because we don't have to fight for resources. We're going
Correct.
to be, this is something that's compiling onto each other to
Yes.
build upon this hierarchy. and
Absolutely.
and we have a goal in mind. It's like, self-actualization is sort of the goal in these words, but you can use whatever word you want to realize what it actually is, which is striving for your own potential instead of just having this system that's crushing you because of how it's set up and how it's exploiting everyone except for the elite.
Correct. Correct. It's anti-populist.
Exactly, yeah.
It's anti-populist. And when we talk about safety needs, another safety need is personal security.
Mm,
I think repealing the Patriot Act would be an excellent
absolutely.
way to increase your personal security, because if you're constantly being surveilled, there's no way that you can actually be responsible for your own security, because somebody is always looking over your shoulder. George Orwell in the book 1984 referred to this as Big Brother. Big Brother
Hmm.
is always looking, you're always like, yo, who's watching me? Who's
Yeah.
watching me? There's an old 80s song by an R&B singer called Rockwell, who was actually Barry Gordy's son. And he had that song. The only reason the song was famous was because Michael Jackson sung the hook on it. And the song was called Somebody's Watching Me. And the song goes, I always feel like somebody's watching me. If you're always feeling like somebody's watching, and the next line of the song, he said, and I've got no privacy.
Hmm.
So if you're always feeling like somebody's watching you, there's no way you can ever feel secure personally.
Yeah.
So abolishing the Patriot Act, repealing the Patriot Act, and
Yes.
ending mass surveillance will be a great way to increase personal security. Uh, Go ahead.
And the first step to that, I just need to say, like, pardon Edward Snowden. He did us a favor by releasing the information he did. And I'm with him. He is absolutely needs to be pardoned. He needs to be able to live wherever he likes because he's
And
he's a hero.
I'll double down on that. Not only should Edward Snowden be pardoned, free Julian Assange and
Yeah.
free Chelsea Manning.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Chelsea
Free
Manning and
both of
Julian
them.
Assange are both, yeah, also people that need to be, pardoned and allowed to do whatever they want because they did more for humanity than those who are persecuting them.
Correct. They are heroes and they
Yeah.
deserve to be treated as such.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
deserve to be treated as such. I think another safety need that will providing health, is to abolish the big pharmaceutical lobby, the big pharmaceutical industry, and legalizing marijuana nationwide, because everybody understands the benefits of marijuana and its variety of forms, and how marijuana is considerably more useful than many of your pharmaceuticals that are used to treat, for example, cancer patients or people who have anxiety disorders. Marijuana has proven to be considerably more effective for painkiller, for relieving pain, instead of taking cortisones or Toradol or some of these other painkillers that are used that are becoming, or marijuana used as a painkiller would be far more beneficial, and it would dramatically reduce the opioid crisis that is taking place around the world.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I would go even further with both of those points and say, not only get pharmaceuticals out of politics, but get money out of politics,
I
private
like that idea.
corporations.
I like that
And
idea.
yes, we're going to talk about that in a couple of episodes from now.
We
And
certainly
then
are.
as far as the sort of cannabis legalization conversation, I think we need to decriminalize all of the drugs,
I thoroughly agree
because
with that too.
you're not, when you're going for treatment for drug addiction, you're not treating drugs. You're treating, other issues, including mental health issues. You're treating,
Correct.
Trauma, basically. And so that's, we criminalizing these things, and then compiling the sort of pharmaceutical industry within these political realms and policy, and how much influence they have. Like, this is all sort of compiling into this awful setup we have. And
Right.
so again, it goes back to like, let's just scrap the structures and the institutions we have and like build them back in a better way than they have than we've ever seen, because we can be inclusive, and we can.
Exactly. And when we talk about inclusivity, and I guess how are we doing on time?
We have 20 minutes left.
Well, 20 minutes left. Okay, perfect. All right, excellent. Thank you. When we talk about inclusivity, the next level, the third level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs is love and belonging, or as I incorrectly said, love and happiness. But quite honestly, love and belonging leads to love and happiness. When we talk about friendship and intimacy and family and a sense of connection, a great way to restore families is to repeal the crime bill of 1994 and end mandatory minimum sentencing. Because let's not forget, Joe Biden wrote a crime bill that locked up a whole lot of brown people and essentially destroyed a generation or two of Black and brown families. A great way to put those families back together again is to repeal the crime bill and mandatory minimum sentencing, and anybody that got sent to jail for a low level of drug offense, a nonviolent drug offense, let them out of prison. And and guess what? When you let them out of prison, you pay them some sort of financial restitution for time served, because they were unable to work. And good luck with them trying to find a job. So you pay them, and you pay them some sort of reparations for wrongly imprisoning them.
Yeah.
That's what needs to happen. And because these people who are now felons cannot vote, a great way to make sure that you have a sense of belonging or a sense of connection or feeling as if you are part of the body politic, which is a group of people, is to make sure that you pass the Voting Rights Act, to make sure that everybody who is eligible to vote can vote. A couple of episodes, Ms. Wells, you and I discussed voting in the United States. And towards the end of the episode, we discussed the Knight Foundation study and the 100 Million Project, how essentially 100 million people in the United States don't vote, and 92 million eligible voters choose not to participate in the electoral process because they feel completely disenfranchised by politics.
Mm-hmm.
Feeling disenfranchised is the exact opposite of belonging.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
and for reference, the voting episode, I think, was episode 20. So it was like
absolutely
2 weeks ago.
So yeah. So again, if you're sitting at home watching this episode now, listening to us, go ahead and watch that too. Learn more about voting. And by the way, if you see what I've got here, I got my new jewelry here. You see me, I'm flexing. I voted. You should vote too. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, but you should exercise your 15th, 19th, or 26th Amendment rights.
Absolutely.
Or if you're in Washington, D.C., your 23rd Amendment rights.
Yeah, there you go.
We make sure we cover all the bases. A great way to make sure that we rebuild and restore families is to abolish Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. You know this
Yes.
acronym as ICE,
Yes.
because ICE locked up a whole lot of brown people in cages.
Yeah.
And there's about 544 orphans who have not been reunited with their families right now. A great way to make sure that those families don't get broken up is to not break them up in the first place.
Exactly.
Keep families together. Keep your mom and dad with their sons and daughters.
Yeah.
Keep their aunts and uncles and their grandmothers and grandfathers together. Keep them all together. Family first.
Yeah.
Don't break them up because they speak a different language and they look different than you and they eat different food from you. Keep them together. Abolish ICE. Find the kids. Find the mothers and fathers of these kids that you orphaned. Put them back together again.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, even further, like, let's just get rid of the policies that we have on immigration, because they're horrendous and they are not doing any good. They're just tearing families apart.
I agree.
Yeah, and it's devastating. And the reality is that we have created the circumstances in which many of these families are seeking, asylum in our countries, in Canada
Correct.
and the US. And
Correct.
so, yeah, so look into that further, do your research, because we've talked about it before as well. And it's a big issue.
Absolutely. Another way to make sure that you feel as if you're a part of something is, and make sure that families come back together again, abolish private prisons.
Please,
because
yeah.
of, because private prisons require clientele. Who are the clientele? Prisoners. How do you get more prisoners? You make more laws that purposefully lock up more Black and brown people so they remain incarcerated. That way these private prisons continue to make money hand over fist. And abolish prison labor. Because if you're prison labor it's the new Jim Crow. It is slavery.
Yes.
It is slavery. So if you want to make sure that people feel like they're a part of something, get rid of prison. Stop locking people up.
Yeah, and that's absolutely tied in with sort of the war on drugs conversation and the
Yes.
pharmaceutical stuff that we just mentioned a couple minutes ago. Like, this is all sort of packaged in an intersectional way for us
Absolutely.
to address social issues,
Absolutely.
socioeconomic issues, all of the things that impact how our identities are I guess oppressed in one way or another, because we want to get rid of white supremacy, that's for sure, because that's what our governments are based in right now. Like,
Right.
let's just get rid of that.
Let's get rid of it. Let's get rid of it. And then when we talk about esteem, we talk about respect and self-esteem. This is the next level. We talk about self-esteem and status and recognition and strength and freedom. How about rewriting the United States Constitution and making sure that everybody has equal protection under the law, and making sure everybody has the same rights across the board? Again, passing the Equality Act to make sure that our LGBTQIA plus people have the same rights as everybody else that exists, because they're human beings just like you and I. Making sure that American descendants of enslaved people get reparations is a great way to have some self-respect. And there's a great way to have freedom. Just remember, the form of freedom is choice. The content of freedom is control over the production of the choices you have available to you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely. And as someone who is in the LGBTQ, like, IA plus community, like, it boggles my mind that someone like me might not have rights, and that's scary. And
It is.
why is that still a thing? My goodness, it's wild to me. But
It is absurd.
yeah, yeah.
It is absurd. It is
And I
absurd.
absolutely agree that we need reparations for American descendants of slaves, because, like, I feel like this is like just a basic thing that we've been talking about it for weeks, months. It should be on everyone's radar. We should be having these conversations and implementing these things,
Absolutely.
because like these people deserve to be on, you know, in the hierarchy. Like that's the
Exactly.
thing, is like these people deserve basic needs. And
Exactly.
like many people who are American descendants of slaves, like all of these policies that we're talking about, they have served in the past to make sure they're not on the hierarchy of needs, or
Correct.
like have the needs available to them, I should say.
Correct. Correct.
So yeah.
Time check, please.
We have 12 minutes.
12 minutes left? Oh, plenty of time, plenty of
Yeah.
time. And to kind of go along with everything you so eloquently said, Miss Wells, when you talk about Black people making sure that we have basic needs, there's a 3-word phrase that a lot of people seem to have adopted that sort of, to a certain extent, embodies those basic sort of needs. How about that phrase, Black Lives Matter? How about that? Making sure that Black people get the basic sort of protections. So,
Yeah.
so when you see a Black person in the streets and they potentially have a dangerous a knife in their hands, they're treated the same as a white person. They're not shot up dead. They're negotiated with, and the situation can be potentially de-escalated,
Yeah.
as opposed to as opposed to saying, okay, oh, they're Black and they've got a knife, shoot them.
Right.
Okay, this is part of the ethos of what Black Lives Matter is about. It's
Of
making
course.
sure that our basic needs are met so we can be treated as human beings. Let's not forget, the first episode of many months ago, I mentioned a 4-word phrase, the 4 fights: humanity, freedom, equality, and survival.
Yeah.
Humanity, freedom, equality, and survival. Those 4 fights are essentially wrapped up in Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Absolutely.
They're wrapped in a blanket of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Because if you can meet the basic needs of humanity, the basic needs of freedom, the basic needs of survival, and the basic needs of equality,
Yeah.
you're on your way to self-actualization.
Yeah.
And self-actualization is becoming the best version of yourself. It's becoming the best human being you can possibly be.
Yeah.
Now, Catherine, we talked about, we decided to entitle this episode Maslow and the American Dream. And so more often than not, you know, Americans have been sold the American dream, where it's, hey, you know what, if you work hard, you go to the right schools, you get the right internship, you get good grades, you eat right, you date the right person, you drive the right car, you get the right clothes, that you'll eventually reach some sort of success in life. And you'll reach this place where you feel, hey, you know what, I'm successful and this is where I'm supposed to be. And the baby boomers told a whole lot of people in Generation X and Generation Y and Generation Z to do these things. Go to school, get good grades. And you know what? If you do all of this stuff, the American dream will take care of you. And we were also told that the highest form of humanity, or that level of self-actualization, is just simply to be successful. And success was defined as doing all of these other things that the boomers, our parents, and potentially grandparents told us to do. But then when we get to the point where we do all of this stuff, we realize that we feel like we're just empty people. We're just like, okay, yeah, now what? I got a master's degree or 2. I did my PhD. I've got a really nice job. And I still feel unfulfilled. What the hell is wrong with me? And that sort of perpetual unhappiness, it leads to a certain chronic indifference where you're just like, oh gosh, you know what? I don't care. I'll just go to work, come home, go to work, come home. And you don't necessarily, and that sort of perpetual unhappiness leads to apathy. And apathy creates the conditions for perpetual unhappiness. So when you become completely disengaged from everything, or when you don't feel like you're a part of something, or you don't feel like you belong to anything, you just perpetually feel unhappy. And that loop of being always unhappy as a result of chronic indifference just perpetuates itself and leads to a whole generation of people that feel lost right now, especially during this pandemic. And when boomers told Generation Next, Generation Y, and Generation Z, hey, you know what? Go ahead and do all of this stuff that makes you a success. We were never told, you know what? It's okay. You know what? When you go to a particular institution, you go to school, you know what? Don't even worry about good grades. Just be a kind and decent human being. Be a kind and decent human being. And if you do reach a certain level of success, make sure you use that level of success to make sure other people can become the best versions of themselves. There's an old adage, Catherine, a rising tide floats all boats. So if you reach that point of you being the best version you can be, you can ultimately be in a position to help other people become the best versions they can become. It's like when you're on an airplane and you're the in-flight instructions and they tell you, please put on your face mask before helping others.
Yeah.
It's that sort of philosophy. If you have enough air to breathe, which is a physiological need, hopefully clean air. If you have enough air to breathe, you can help somebody else to breathe. So when we talked about the whole situation of trying to become successful and thinking that success is the highest form of being a human being or that self-actualization, we get trapped in a web of success. And we're just like, hey, you know what? All I want to do is be successful. And then once you get a taste of success, all you want is more success. Mm-hmm. And that becomes an addictive behavior. It's no more addictive than drugs or sex or alcohol or food or sugar or information. And we were always told that success means having money or having the nicest clothes, or to borrow a phrase from one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, Ric Flair, we're always told that success means having the biggest house on the biggest hill on the big side of town. and it's not that at all. It's not going to be that at all. It's never going to be that. There's no policy that we can give you for self-actualization. There's no singular piece of legislation that's going to get you to a point to say, hey, you know what? This piece of legislation that's supposed to serve everybody is going to make me a better human being. And it's going to make me the best human being I could possibly be. That's not how it works. If you reach the best version of yourself, you won't need a policy. Mm-hmm. You won't need a policy because you'll be so in tune with yourself that you'll be able to be governed by yourself. Yeah. You'll be able to govern yourself. And you'll be self-governing. And being self-governing, having the ability to do what you want when you want and not being constrained by a set of policies that dictates what you should be doing, that is what freedom looks like. That is what freedom smells like, tastes like, and feels like. And that is the American dream. Yeah. That is the true American dream. And when we talk about self-actualization, it comes back to morality and being able to make right from wrong. Morality is making sure everybody has a place to sleep at night. Morality is making sure that everybody has food to eat. Morality is making sure that everybody has clean air to breathe and clean water to drink, and making sure that everybody has a job. And morality is making sure that everybody has healthcare. Most importantly, morality is making sure that everybody gets treated fairly and equally. So when we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if we meet the basic level stuff, food, clean air, water, shelter, we can easily reach the higher levels. So then we become higher levels of human beings. So then society improves as a whole. And then, sure, we can have government to help us with our stuff, but we won't necessarily be reliant on government because we'll be self-reliant. And being self-reliant is the ultimate test of freedom.
Mm. That was wonderful. Oh my goodness, that was incredible. Thank you for going over all of that. And
you're welcome.
Yeah, my goodness, there was a lot there. And I think the main thing that we wanted to use this sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs for is like we can look at policies that are things that we can implement now. But yeah, like I think the beauty of it is like once you implement some policies that actually take care of basic needs for people, you basically get rid of the need for the bottom part of that pyramid, and everyone sort of ends up on this sort of equal playing field where we can, like, we have the luxury of being actually free to pursue self-actualization, which is really just striving for your own potential and whatever that looks like, because we're all diverse, we all want different things out of life, but once those things are taken care of, and of course there's ups and downs in life and whatever else, but like that's the point, and that's why the Maslow's hierarchy of needs is still something that holds true, you know, exactly. 60, 70 years later.
Exactly. If we take care of the basic needs of humanity, I would argue that you no longer need a pyramid. Because everybody is on a level playing field, you wouldn't need to graduate from one level to the next. It would go from, quite honestly, a pyramid to more of a Venn diagram. And everybody shares everything. And everybody gets the same amount of resources, and everybody gets the same opportunities to live the best life they can possibly live.
And really the pursuit of happiness. I mean, that's what it is.
And that's what the concept, that's what we talk about in the United States: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if we're looking to pursue happiness, make sure you get some policies that serve everybody.
Yes, exactly.
That way people, brothers and sisters, can be happy.
Yeah.
And walk around with smiles on their faces.
Exactly. And my goodness.
That's right.
And oh my goodness. Yeah, that's great. That's a great way to end the episode. I had a couple of critiques, but I don't even think that they need to be said. And so of the hierarchy of needs, I mean, just because it is old, but I think that's a good way to end. And if you're curious, you can always text or send me a message and we can chat about any of that.
Absolutely.
So Joe, thank you so much. This was so wonderful, and I'm so glad you were able to have that sort of closing statement.
No problem. It's no problem. I thought about that while I was swinging the bells this morning. I was like, you know what? Yeah, it's this. So yeah, we just try to, you know, we're not necessarily smarter than everybody else. We just have a way of making sure the information gets presented in a digestible form so you all can take it morsel by morsel, absorb it, and it becomes part of your system.
Yeah, there you go. That's wonderful. And that's, I mean, like we've said before, we do this because we care. We want people to be able to reach self-actualization. So
absolutely,
that's the point of these. And we try to do it in the most inclusive way as possible. But again, if you don't like something or you want to chat about something more, we both are always available to chat with anybody and everybody.
Anybody and everybody, doesn't matter. Ms. Wells, what do we have next? I know we're running out of time.
We are. So next week we're going to do another episode on healthcare with some updates of what's happening.
Yes, we are. So if you want a little primer, watch episode 5 of the Joe and Kat Chat series. Some of that stuff, information is going to be repeated. We're going to come with some more fresh information about healthcare, and we're going to talk about it. We're going to give everybody what they want and everybody what they need.
Yes. Yeah, lots to talk about. So again, thank you, Joe. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Take care.
You take care too.
Peace. Yes, ma'am.
Bye.